Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of the Big at the Back podcast. I am joined once again by Matthew Higgins. Matt, how are you?
I am great. It's a Monday morning. The Premier League is back with a bang. It was an interesting weekend of football. I feel like the opening weekend always feels more interesting than any other weekend because you start to get a view of teams and how they're going. So I've had a good weekend, although it was filled with playing cricket both days and it was very hot. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. Weekend's just very quiet, watching a lot of football because I have nothing better to do and I'm kind of obsessed. Other than that, though, relatively quiet. So not really got a whole lot on. Got a half marathon next weekend, so I figured it should be probably a rest and recovery weekend rather than anything overly dramatic.
I fancy actually running.
I mean, I've got Brighton Marathon next year, so that's what I'm building up for. I've got a full training plan and everything because my back is so broken that I need double the time anyone else does. So let's loads and loads to talk about today. Huge weekends of football. Game week 1 kicked off with a bang. Matt, what were your overall thoughts?
It was mostly, I think, as expected in terms of FPL and the point scorers. A couple of surprises here and there. Obviously, the Liverpool result was a big shock. And I mean, not so much Salah getting a goal and an assist, but the actual conceded concession of 2 goals when a lot of people have doubled up on Liverpool defenders, obviously has
Neither of
ruined.
which should have counted, by the way, objectively. If those goals were scored by Liverpool, everyone would be up in arms about it. But because it's against
Nah, I'm not having that for a single second. But there we go. But other than that, I think the only other real maybe surprising result was Bournemouth winning 2-0 against Villa. A good result for them in their first week back in the Premier League. You could say maybe Man U losing is a surprise, but is it really a surprise anymore?
I mean, we got the same Man U we had last year. I think that's all that needs to be said. It's exactly the same team. People saying, "Oh, they haven't spent loads of money." They've just spent 60 million on a centre back. They've spent out on a left back. They're probably getting Van der Beek for another 80 million. They're still spending.
Do you mean De Jong? Because Van der Beek
Yeah,
is already there.
all these Dutch players are all interchangeable, and they're all going to be terrible for Man U. It's a what recurring theme. But yeah, Man U was very interesting. Spurs blowing Southampton away. Obviously, Erling Haaland, what a performance on his first game in the Premier League. So loads and loads and loads to dig into. We're going to go back to the usual formula of going through the games one by one and talking about them from a football and FPL context. So let's start with the one that you and I watched together, which was Crystal Palace losing 2-0 to Arsenal. Arsenal playing away from home and getting the win and the clean sheet. What did you make of it?
I think this went pretty much as most people expected. There was always the potential for Palace to get something from this game, but I think a lot of people were obviously banking on Arsenal assets based on their pre-season form, and that was proven correct. So, I mean, maybe the surprise that Jesus didn't really get a look in on goal at all, didn't have really a shot from memory. It definitely didn't have a shot on target because I back that. But other than that, it was Zinchenko. Obviously, a lot of people have got in. Who just had a free header from a corner, which he nodded back across for Martinelli to head home. So there's a lot of happy people there with the Zinchenko and Martinelli double up, and also Saka getting an assist for the own goal. So I think, yeah, it went pretty much as expected. Zinchenko picking up the bonus points. A lot of people will be happy about that because a lot of people have got him in. Obviously, I have. Come on. But yeah, I think it was a good start to the season. It was a good kick-off, a Friday night. I do still feel a little bit... I don't know how I feel about Friday night kickoff to start the season. I feel like a Saturday should be your lead into the season, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, fixtures are a whole nother podcast on their own, aren't they? Similar to you, I don't know. I thought Jesus can probably consider himself unlucky to not going to look in. He was let down in the final ball by teammates a couple of times. I thought Martinelli was by far the most electric of Arsenal's attackers. I think he was the one most on the ball and most able to do something. I thought Saka had a very quiet game. I know he got the assist, but he didn't really do very much with the ball when he had it in the opposition third, whereas Martinelli was always attacking and probably should have got a few more goals than he did. From an FPL standpoint, Zinchenko stealing all the headlines. I think the idea of Arteta is to have Ben White at right back and almost shift into that back three, giving Zinchenko license to play that Cancelo role. Really, really makes him an attractive asset in FPL moving forward. His price is probably going to rise this week. But I think Zinchenko is a really, really good own. And also Martinelli is another one to own as well, I think. But I think Saka, I don't really like any of the 8 mil options at the moment, but I think if you're going to go for an Arsenal midfielder, Martinelli is the one to go for. What do you think?
Probably I'm inclined to agree. I'm with you. I think the 8 million options, I think Diaz is the most attractive of that bracket. But obviously it depends on where you sit with your Liverpool assets. So I think it's probably a good idea to have one, because then you can move around quite easily and quite comfortably depending on form and fixtures. But I don't know. I don't think Saka's the one for me. And in response to you think Zinchenko's will rise? He already has risen. He's gone out to 5.1. So he rose last night, and so did Erling Haaland, obviously.
Yeah, no surprise there at all. It also blocks the Kane to Haaland move for a lot of people. But we'll come to that in a minute. Quick word on Crystal Palace, though. I don't think they played badly, but I think they were too cautious, especially being at home. In the second half, they started making things happen, but by then it was too late and Arsenal held firm. So the jury's out on Palace. I don't think from an FPL perspective you want to touch them because of their fixtures, being quite brutally honest. Maybe in the second half of this first half of the season after the game week 8 points or so.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Liverpool and City away in their next 3, so you're not going to be going anywhere near them for now. I do still think they're a good side, so yeah, potentially after that you'll see where the cards start to fall, but I think you can't really read too much into this first few fixtures for them.
Yeah, agreed. Let's move on to the Saturday kickoffs then. And the early game was the Liverpool 2-2 draw with Fulham. Now, for this game, I was watching it and I was quite annoyed watching it. I wasn't happy at all. Fulham, to their credit, played really, really well, came out and harassed Liverpool, and our midfield just couldn't get to grips with it at all. I've been saying all summer we need strengthening in the middle, and yeah, it was so evident from this game because we were really, really woeful. I was looking at this in the post game and I was thinking, you know what? They're really, really hot lunchtime in London. They've travelled on train down from the northwest. Jurgen Klopp came out afterwards. He did a 4.5-minute interview about how his players' attitude wasn't there, how they did this wrong, did this wrong. And then what I liked was he made a comment afterwards saying, and the pit, because of our attitude, and it didn't help with the pitch being so dry, but that meant that we weren't able to do this, and we didn't perform correctly, and we didn't put the effort in. And the media picked up the pitch dry bit and made a huge deal out of it as if he was moaning. It's such a media spin of Klopp's moaning all the time. And it was like, I'm the first to criticize when he moans, but honestly, ridiculous that they've taken that bit out of context. I thought it was really annoying.
I love it. I think it was hilarious. My favourite thing that came out of it, though, was the Fulham Twitter admin on Sunday morning just putting a picture of the Craven Cottage pitch with the sprinklers on, and it was like the Craven Cottage turf looking beautiful yesterday or something like that.
Absolutely. In terms of the game, honestly, it's so frustrating. In the first goal, there was a clear foul on Henderson in that phase of play, so it should never have counted, but the ref was being lenient to both sides. So that one, I'm annoyed at. It shouldn't have been a goal, but you can let it go. And it was a very good header on the back post from Mitrovic. The penalty, never a penalty in 100,000 years. If it hadn't have been given, VAR wouldn't have given it. It's one of those where, because it wasn't a clear and obvious wrong, despite zero contacts being made, by the way, not just minimal contacts. Mitrovic dived with zero contacts, and the ref gave it as a penalty. Utterly ridiculous decision. That being said, though, Liverpool didn't deserve anything more than draw out of the game. We were the second best team on the pitch, and I think Fulham did deserve something out of it. What were your thoughts on the game as a whole? I know you're at cricket. Did you get to watch any of it?
I didn't. So the extent of my football watching this weekend has been pretty much entirely highlights. I saw some of the West Ham game yesterday because of the way it fell. But even then, I didn't see the sort of last half an hour of it. So from what I've seen, yeah, I probably agree with you about the foul in the build-up to the first Fulham goal. I do sort of. I would like to see the clarification on why that wasn't given, because they're saying now that the VAR conversations are going to be published, so that should be interesting to see that. But yeah, a really powerful header from Mitrovic at the back post, got up early above his man. I was feeling really smug about not having Salah in my team. I was getting updates from the sideline at cricket, getting told, "Oh, it's 1-0," and then eventually it fed back that Salah had got a goal and an assist. Even when he just had the assist for the first goal, I was like, "I'll take that. If he only gets an assist, I will take that." And I think even his goal, it was a little bit of luck in there, wasn't it? It just sort of bounced off Darwin and fell at his feet for a tap in. So I don't know. I think, without seeing the whole game and the whole context of the whole game, obviously I'll take your word for it that you were second best.
Yeah.
I don't think there's too much to worry about from a Liverpool perspective still. Like, it's one game, it's the first game of the season. It can take a little bit of time to get up and running. So I'm sure they will come good. I saw Luis Diaz hit the post with a really good shot. And you had a goal disallowed in the first half as well, I think, didn't you, for offside?
He did, yeah. It was a beautiful finish. With Luis Diaz in particular, though, when Firmino was playing, he was dropping deep, and then it allowed Luis Diaz to get forward. When Darwin Núñez came on, he was magnificent, by the way. He was so good, completely changed the game. But it meant that Diaz was often the one coming deep and helping set the play up, and Salah and Darwin Núñez bombing forward. So I think Darwin's got to be starting moving forward. He's still in the bedding in phase, but surely he starts in the next game, which means I think Luis Diaz probably becomes a worse asset, just based on the fact that Darwin's playing as is. I wouldn't exactly hate dropping Diaz and Jesus for another striker and Darwin, for example, if I was in your position. If you've gone without Salah, then this is Liverpool playing terribly in a real banana skin where they've not shown up, and Salah's still got 12 FPL points. I imagine being dumb enough to go into the season not having him.
Hey, all I'm saying is I haven't got Salah, and you only got 3 more points than me this week.
True, but then you also haven't got Salah for the next game, or the one after that, or the one after that. So they're going to add up and they're going to stack up. And just picture it, if you had Salah in, you'd be ahead of me.
Not necessarily. It depends who I'd have dropped. Well, actually, no, because all my midfielders were shit. But then obviously you've got the different situation. I mean, if I'd have started Wilson, I'd have been ahead of you.
That's true. I'm not sure why you didn't start Wilson against a newly promoted Nottingham Forest team. That was stupid.
Yeah, I just didn't. The other options there, like Grealish. So the other options I had were dropping one of the Liverpool defenders. Not going to do that. My other 3 defenders all got clean sheets and more. If you're including Zinchenko and Chilwell, we both got assists. So then across the midfield, it was Luis Diaz. Not going to drop him. Jack Grealish. Not going to drop him against West Ham because we're rubbish. And Jadon Sancho. He would have been. Sancho was the only real option. But I thought, Man United at home, new manager, new bounce, all that sort of stuff. And I wasn't going to drop Jesus either because it's his pre-season form. But there we go. That's enough.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a really tough one, isn't it? Let's move on to actually something to be said for Mitrovic, because I think he got 2 goals that he shouldn't have got, but I think he looks very lively. I thought Andreas Pereira looked really good in this game as well. If you've got Pereira, certainly hold. If Mitrovic is definitely an option in FPL moving forward as well for everyone. He's also on penalties as well, so I think that's a really, really good 6.5 option.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've got that sort of range, like that sort of budget striker, he is probably the obvious choice now.
Yeah, I'd certainly say so. Next game is Bournemouth beating Aston Villa 2-0, a game that we didn't see coming. I thought Bournemouth were going to lose every game 1-0 this year, but they've come up with a win in their first game. So they were looking really, really good. Worth noting that Kelly actually got all of the bonus points and was actually the second highest bonus points for the game week, if I'm reading this correctly. Interesting game. Villa looked shambolic, especially defending set pieces. And going forward, they didn't really look like they had a lot. So, what did you think from the highlights of this game?
Yeah, like you say, this is probably the most surprising result of the week. Well, the Liverpool result excluded. I think it was your words on Friday night when we were going through our score predictions for this week was, Bournemouth won't score. So good to see you proven wrong. Coutinho blanking again. Obviously, a lot of people have been looking towards him as sort of like that to pick up that form he had when he first signed in January last year. Interesting, obviously, as well that Gerrard has given the captaincy to McGinn and dropped Tyrone Mings. So does that mean? Does that bode well for like the club as a whole? Then are there new signings taking a little bit more time to bed in than perhaps we thought? I don't think I can read anything too much into this game. I'm not going to be rushing to get any of these assets in from either side. Either like Bournemouth, yeah, it's a great result for them coming back into the league. Clean sheet, 3 points. What more could you ask for? But especially when you look at their fixtures, obviously City away next, and then Liverpool away in game week 4. I mean, you're not going anywhere near them, are you?
And they've got Arsenal in between that as well. Even if you look at Aston Villa, from game week 5, they've got Arsenal away, City at home, Leicester away. So their fixtures don't exactly get nice either. So I think Eric Bailey, I keep doing that. Leon Bailey starting and playing the whole 90 minutes was encouraging. So I'd hope he can get something in the next 2 games. He's going nowhere for me, but it's almost a stay of execution for him at the moment.
I mean, even though he's obviously the budget midfielder, if he's starting, you want them to be getting returns. So there's always going to be another option that comes up if they don't start performing.
Yeah, for me, he's getting a bit of a stay at the moment, but we'll wait and see. Next game to chat about is Leeds beating Wolves 2-1, and I was saying it before the game that Wolves really are a club that's going through big peril at the moment. There's talk now of Connor Cody going to Everton as well, losing 2-1 to Leeds, who were shocking last year. I think it's a real, almost a danger ground for them. And if Wolves don't really start getting something out of these next 3 or 4 games, they could be in real trouble of relegation this season because the fixtures turn quite sharply in game week 7 or 8. What were your thoughts on the game overall?
It's another one that I'm not reading too much into because I think both sides are in sort of a transitional phase at the moment. I think Brendan Aronson looked quite good for Leeds. He impressed me.
Yeah.
Obviously, didn't quite get the second goal. It went down as an Aït-Nouri own goal in the end, and rightly so. The one thing I will say is I think Meslier had quite a good game in goal for Leeds. He did make quite a few saves. I think one tipped over the bar from a header. The thing that surprised me most is Daniel Podence picking up the 3 bonus points in this one. Did not see that one coming.
Yeah, everyone was talking about Pedro Neto, but Podence has actually taken up that false 9 role for Wolves. So he probably was the 5.5 million midfielder to go for. 3 bonus points and a goal from him. I still wouldn't be looking at him from an FPL perspective, though. I don't think you touch anyone from either of these teams. Wolves are all, rubbish. And Leeds, I think, are just too overpriced. You've got Jack Harrison at 6.5, Rodrigo at 6.5. If they were 0.5 million cheaper, you consider them, but they're not quite in that consideration bracket, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, especially, I mean, you could potentially argue that Wolves' next fixture is a nice one, which is Fulham at home. But looking at the way Fulham played on Saturday, that's definitely not the case. And like you say with Leeds, I am going to be keeping an eye on Leeds because I do think now that Jesse Marsh has had a full transfer window to sign the players that he wants to sign, it will be interesting to see how they all settle in. They got Chelsea, not this week and coming the weekend after, but after that they've got quite a nice run of 4 or 5 fixtures. So potentially, depending on how they get in the next couple of weeks, I could look to shift to a couple. They are probably a little bit overpriced, but I will be keeping an eye on them.
Well, the next game is away versus Southampton, but going away is never easy, and that's a long trip. Then, as you say, it's Chelsea. After that, you've got Brighton, Everton, Brentford, Nottingham Forest, then Manchester United, all objectively easy games. So
I just do love that every time it's Man United, that's an easy one.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Neville in his podcast was saying that they're the easiest team to play against still in the Premier League, and we'll come on to them very shortly. Really uninspiring games to talk about next, and I did watch the highlights of it, and Newcastle looked very good. It looked like quite a fun game to watch, just so boring and uninspiring from an FPL point of view, though. Newcastle 2, Nottingham Forest 0, most predictable results in the world. Wilson getting a goal, Shah getting an absolute thunderbolt. I don't know if you've seen his goal. Joe Linton even getting an assist, but Shah being on for 43 bonus points, really high in the BPS. Of 43 bonus points? 3 bonus points, 43.
No, 43 bonus points. He is well ahead of everyone else at the moment.
Triple captain material. But yeah, Shah being maybe the Newcastle defender we'd all been sleeping on. I guess there was a concern whether he started or not, but now we know he's starting. Is he going to be a really good budget option moving forward?
He could be. I think it depends if you've got any other Newcastle defenders. I don't think you want to be doubling up. But I think a lot of that comes down to obviously the goal. If he doesn't score that goal, he's probably not going to be anywhere near as high on the BPS score. So I would still be looking at the fullbacks, because if you look at the 2 and 1 bonus points, that was Target and Trippier. So I think they're going to be providing you more options going forward. I think it was just a bit of it was an absolute thunder bastard from Shah. It was a great hit. So I just don't think you're going to be banking on him doing something like that every week. Like say Wilson getting a goal, a lot of people have been on Wilson in pre-season, so paying back the faith. I think he scored 4 in the last 5 opening Premier League weekends. And Joe Linton actually, I thought, looked pretty lively as well. I think Forest looks poor. If you look at Henderson, he made 7 saves, so it just shows that they were very open at the back. And then even when Joe Linton at one point picked the ball up sort of near the halfway line, had a run through, broke inside and scuffed his shot wide, I think Forest look like they could struggle. Jesse Lingard did absolutely nothing, and he's sort of their big hope. Oh, and he came on towards the end of the second half. I was surprised he didn't start. They had Surridge and Johnson starting up front, so I think they'll need to find something fairly quickly. And just looking at their fixtures, they play West Ham this weekend, so that's probably where they'll get it.
I was actually having a chat to my dad about this before the season kicked off. My dad's a lifelong Fulham fan, so followed the Championship a lot more closely than I did last year. But he was saying that Forest, the way they got promoted was essentially by riding a bit of a wave, and their manager is very, very good. But it was very clear that they were overachieving by getting into the Premier League. And now it feels like reality is going to bite them a bit. It's a shame, but I think they looked like a mid-table Championship side, which they are essentially.
I think the thing is as well, they've had such a massive turnover in the summer because of the players. They had about 6 or 7 players on loan last season. So that is going to be very hard to overcome going into a Premier League season for the first time in 20-odd years.
Absolutely. Next game to chat about is Spurs beating Southampton 4-1. Now, for all the talk of Kane and Son, and everyone seemed to forget about Kulusevski, who was utterly magnificent. Everything good Spurs did came from Kulusevski. Well-deserved and well-taken goal at the end. They did an analysis of him on Match of the Day as well. But having watched the game, he was absolute quality throughout. Really, really good. I can't see him being dropped for Richarlison, to be honest. I think Richarlison's a bench player because Kulusevski is just so good. Of the 8 million players, he's the one that really did well. I feel like with Harry Kane, I don't think he's necessarily a great option in FPL because while he had some chances, he was actually reverting and he was playing a lot more like a quarterback than he was a striker. And it's worth noting in Haaland versus Kane, everything City did against West Ham was designed to create chances for Haaland. Everything went through Haaland and everything played to Haaland's strengths. With Spurs, it wasn't like that. Chances were going to the fullbacks, to Son, to an extent Kulusevski, but Kane wasn't the one they were creating for. He was doing the creating, but wasn't on the end of the creativity. So I think that makes, despite him being on penalties and despite him still being a wonderful player, from an FPL standpoint, I think you need to have swapped from Kane to Haaland yesterday, realistically.
Yeah, and if you haven't done it now, it's too late unless you've already got money in the bank. Because like you say, Haaland rose and Kane dropped. So a lot of people have made that change straight away. So if you've left it till today, till Monday to do that, then it is too late. I agree with you. I also saw a pitch map of their average positions in the game, and Kane was sort of basically back towards the halfway line in his average position, like you say, dropping in to spread the balls and ping them over the back, which he does very well. But Haaland was much further up the pitch. He was that target man. He was the main man. He was getting the ball down. He was bringing other people into play, and he was spinning off to get in again, which you don't get as much from Kane at the moment. So, yeah, I'm very glad I went with Haaland over Kane. But like you say, Kulusevski was the one that got under the radar. I think a lot of people didn't want to have him in at the start because they're worried he's only going to play in the first game, and then Richarlison's going to come in because of his suspension. But it's going to be a tough one for Conte now. What's he going to do? Does he stick with Kulusevski because he's got a great game, or does he play the man that they paid a lot of money to bring in? It's a really tricky dilemma.
You can't drop Kulusevski after a performance like that. I think he was absolutely magnificent for them.
I think the other thing to talk about with Spurs as well is obviously the fullbacks. A lot of people went Perisic. A lot of people went Doherty. And, I mean, Emerson Royale picking up 2 assists.
Yeah, and Sessegnon getting a goal as well. So I think with Spurs fullbacks, you know they're going to get points. You just don't know who's going to play. Because let's be honest, Sessegnon and Royale are the 3rd and 4th best fullbacks at Spurs when you've got Perisic and Doherty there. So I think if you can get them at the right time, great. It's not a game I want to play, though. I don't want to play Conte fullback rotation. So from an FPL standpoint, I think Kulusevski is the one to look at. Would be encouraged as well if you own Heung-min Son, because he got real, I want to call it Mo Salah fever, just selfish in a good way. Like the reason we love Salah so much as FPL players is because he's so selfish in if he sees the goal, he just wants to shoot. And that's what Son's got at the moment. So Son's conversion rate of shots isn't going to be nearly as high because he's just shooting absolutely at will at the moment. So I think if you're a Son owner, you can keep the faith at least for the next 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, he did look very, very selfish. I think his ownership is quite a lot lower this season because of his price. But if you have got him, I think there is obviously reason to be slightly optimistic. He did pick up an assist, which is obviously something at least. He had a couple of shots saved. I think he's one decent chance that he put over as well. But I think overall, I'd be encouraged if you're a Son owner still.
Yeah, certainly. Southampton, uninvestable.
I mean, Ward-Prowse took his goal very nicely, but
it's a great goal, but uninvestable. I think, I think it's now 12 in a row. They were saying on Match of the Day that Southampton haven't won a game, so they're in a real bit of trouble. Next game, and it was a bit of a slogfest. It was Everton losing 1-0 to Chelsea, and Chelsea, despite everything, got the job done. Everton set up how you'd expect Everton to set up, just sitting back. And Chelsea did get the penalty to win the game. But honestly, just a very dull and uneventful game of football, I found this to be.
Yeah, I think it was... I didn't go with the Chelsea double up defensively in the end of Chilwell and James. I went with just Chilwell. I think this game in particular is going to be a bit of a one-off because Everton and they're abject, and their front three is the most uninspiring front three in the Premier League, I think, at the moment. And we've spoken about that in our preview pod. But I think obviously Chelsea will have a much tougher task next week when they face Spurs. And it was just a penalty, and that's all it was. And it was a blatant penalty. Chilwell being absolutely manhandled in the box. It was interesting to see Cucurella get some game time after his signing last week. how will that affect the balance of their side going forward? Is he going to be playing much? Because they paid a lot of money for a fullback, and it smacks of a desperation signing because they do not need him. The amount of fullbacks they've got at that club is ridiculous. So, I mean, Jorginho again converting the penalty just seems to every season just seems to be picking up points through his penalties, and they seem to win a lot of them. But again, it's like no one's going to be having him in their team, are they?
No, and even with Cucurella signing, I actually think if you've got Chilwell, switch over to James because Chilwell's minutes are going to be limited. You haven't spent 55 million on a left back for him to be playing second fiddle. So
I mean, look how much they spent on Chilwell as well.
Yeah, but that was a few years ago, and it's always got to be the shiny new toy that gets the game time. So I think Chelsea off the field, there's loads of problems. Let's be honest, they're desperately scrambling around for anyone and everyone. But on the field, I think Reece James is still a decent enough option. I've also got Mason Mount in my team, who did nothing in this game. I probably will keep him just for the next game against Tottenham. But that's only on the basis that I'd rather have two subs next week, and I don't really know what to do. If there was someone obvious to switch him to, I would do it, but Kulusevski would be the obvious one, but he's playing Chelsea in the next game. So I think I'm better off just holding on Mount at the moment and holding the free transfer for next week.
Yeah, I think in general, unless there's a massively obvious transfer that you need to make, so like a lot of people did Kane to Haaland, I think in general it's always good to hold on to that transfer for game week, going into game week 2, and save them for a double up for game week 3, because that's when you've got a lot more information to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And often you'll find what the narrative from game week 1 is completely reversed in game week 2. It can be so to and fro that it's always worth holding out if you can.
So you're telling me that Haaland's going to blank next week? Is that
exactly?
You heard it here first.
Kane with a hat-trick in the North London derby. How bold would it be?
North London derby? Chelsea aren't North London.
I mean, nor Arsenal, really. In that case, I could wait till the end of the week, and when Haaland gets to 11.7, Kane gets to 11.3, go Haaland to Kane. I mean, that would be really against the grain. Let's talk then about the Sunday games, and we'll start with Leicester 2, Brentford 2. Leicester, we've said it before, an absolute state, starting with Vardy and Maddison up top. So both of them returning with assists. Dewsbury Hall with man of the match and getting a goal and 3 bonus points. I think Leicester just feel like they can be got at. They felt like that all of last season, but we were talking about it on Friday. Their squad hasn't really changed in about 3 or 4 years. It's still the same group of players. There's no real progression. There's no real momentum behind them. And I think they can really be got at. Brentford, I think, aren't very good. De Silva coming on with the goal, 4.5 million midfielder for anyone that's interested. And Ivan Toney getting his first of the season as well is nice. But yeah, I didn't watch any of this game, so I just found it so uninspiring.
Yeah, I think, you had the Man U Brighton game on at the same time, so I think overall it was always going to be that was the one to watch. Dewsbury Hall with a great finish, a very good strike from about 25 yards off of his left foot. Other than that, it wasn't a particularly great game. It wasn't an inspiring game, like you say. Castagna with a good header, a good ball in from Maddison. You always know you're going to get that from James Maddison from set pieces. The defending from Leicester for the Ivan Toney goal was absolutely abysmal. He just ghosted in 6 yards out. And they're defending for the De Silva goal as well. They just stood off him, and he cut inside and whips it into the far corner with his left foot. You cannot give players that much time in the Premier League. No. I think Leicester really need to make a signing or two if they're going to look to progress, because like we said, they haven't made a single signing yet. They've lost Kasper Schmeichel now, and potentially could lose Maddison, could lose Tielemans, someone like that, if a big offer comes in before the end of the transfer window. And if one of those go, they are in real trouble.
Yeah, agreed. Without spending too much time on Leicester Brentford, then let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is Brighton beating Manchester United 2-1. So on my walk this morning, I listened to the Gary Neville podcast, and he was saying that Manchester United are the easiest team to play against in the Premier League. He was saying it in the back end of last season. He said it again. Brighton were the better team, were better managed, better coached. Manchester United, absolute state of a club. Ronaldo's been slagging them off all summer. Then they bring him on in a desperation move to try and salvage something against Brighton at home. And it's they're still an absolute travesty of a football team. Roy Keane was talking after the game and having an argument with Gary Neville. Neville was arguing that all the players were still giving 100%. I still don't think that's true. What's your take on Man U at the moment?
It's so hard to tell, isn't it? I think something obviously still isn't clicking. It is very early days. Ten Hag is still in the infancy of his manager, like his reign at the helm of the club. So I think they need to sort out the Ronaldo situation. As long as they've got that cloud hanging over their head, they're not going to be able to perform properly on the pitch. So once that's sorted, I think it just makes sense to get rid of him at this point, because there's just no way that he is going to be at the top of his game knowing that he wants to leave. So get rid of him, try and get someone else in. Yesterday, they made a bid for Marko Arnautovic. I mean, that shows you where this club is at the moment. Don't get me wrong, I love Marko Arnautovic when he was at West Ham. I think he's an absolute bastard of a player, and I mean that in the most loving way. And I think he could do a job, but he's not a Man United player, is he? It reminds me of when they signed Odion Ighalo. It's just out of nowhere, but he's not someone that's going to start. He's going to someone, and he's a bit flexible. He can play on the wing, he can play out front, but defensively they look to shambles. Pascal Gross with 2 goals. He scored more goals against Man United than any other club in the Premier League, which just goes to show that they are his bunny. I do think United in the second half looked better. They made some chances. Rashford had a golden opportunity when Ronaldo put him in, and Sanchez made a great save. It was flagged for offside, but VAR would have overturned that because Ronaldo was onside when the ball was played. So they did make chances, which I guess is the only slightly encouraging thing for them, but they need to be taking them. But I think the sooner they get this Ronaldo situation sorted, the better.
Totally agree. I think get Ronaldo out of there, quite frankly. And if he's there for another half a year, he's not going to be a positive influence on that team. I think it's better for everyone that he goes. The Arnautovic stuff is hilarious. And you just, for all of this talk of a new era with Ten Hag, it's exactly the same pattern. You look back, you think Falcao, Ibrahimovic, Aguero, Cavani, these are all players that have been brought in at the end of their tenure. Admittedly, Ibrahimovic did really well.
Yeah.
Even actually Ronaldo, who has done well, but it's thinking of desperation moves. They are now going to go back to Barcelona and offer 100 million for De Jong just out of desperation. If you're a club and Man United calls inquiring about your player and make an offer, every single club in the world is now going to go, you're desperate, double it. Quite frankly. So they put themselves in a really, really vulnerable position in the transfer market. And I think as a club, they are shot. I think there is something to be said, though, for Brighton, because Gross obviously played very well, but I thought Welbeck has an excellent game for them as well.
Yeah, he looked fantastic, to be fair. The only thing that was missing for him was a goal. He had a couple of chances that he was a header he put wide and things like that. But overall, I think he had a very good game. If he can just get that end product as well, he could be a very interesting prospect. He did get the assist for one of the goals, so he's got that on his plate for the season. He's up and running there, but I don't know how much of it was Brighton playing really well and Welbeck playing really well, and how much of it is Man U being Man U. Brighton's fixtures aren't bad as well. They haven't got a single red fixture if you look at the FDR up until Gameweek 8. But I mean, they've got some trickier ones in there. Newcastle's going to be a harder one. I would say West Ham's going to be a harder one, but their record against West Ham is fantastic. So probably lump in there. They've got Leeds, Fulham, Leicester, Bournemouth, Palace. That is a good run of fixtures. So if they keep this form going and carry that on to the next few game weeks, then you could definitely be looking at some Brighton assets.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they looked very, very good. And that team, despite losing Basuma and Cucurella, looked like they hadn't missed a beat. So really excited to see how they do. the last game for us to speak about is West Ham losing 2-0 to Man City, and it was the Erling Haaland show. And I've seen people saying, oh, if West Ham defended better, I think you defended really well. I just think Haaland was too good. And watching him play, it almost felt unfair. Watching it, it was like he was so much bigger, stronger, and faster than any of your defenders or anyone else on the pitch. It looked like it was a complete mismatch, and he looks like an absolute monster. It was so good, and everything City did went through him, rightly so, I think.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's an absolute beast, and people were a little bit hesitant on him after the Community Shield last weekend when he missed that big chance. But he just showed here exactly the kind of player he is as well. And he's still only 21, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
He won the penalty, which was an absolute stonewall penalty. Areola bringing him down. That was the other sort of thing that I'd spoken about with West Ham before. Who was going to start in goal? It was Fabianski, but he came off injured. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Areola bringing him down. The penalty was fantastically taken, just right in the bottom corner. And then the second goal, him just absolutely burning for pace through and just took it nicely as well. I mean, what I will say is West Ham only had one centre-back on the pitch. We had a back four with 3 full-backs in it. So that's the only thing we're struggling with. But even so, if we had another centre-back on there, it wasn't going to make any difference. I think we played all right, but just Man City and Man City. We've ended our streak. We scored in every home game last season, and the first home game of this season, we drew a blank. But it's not a surprise. City are a good side. I still think they didn't get anywhere near full gear in this game either. I think they've got so much more to come. I think De Bruyne, it was about 3 or 4 times I saw De Bruyne misplace a pass, and I think, what's going on? This guy is actually human. But overall, they were by far and away the better side, as you'd expect. And Haaland could easily get to about 40 goals this season if they keep creating chances for him.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of times, De Bruyne in particular, didn't see Haaland's run or didn't pick him out in time. Once they get that connection and properly click, I think he's going to be scoring hat-tricks for fun, isn't he? He's so good. So let's talk about our FPL teams and how we did things. We both had good weeks. I've ended on 73 points. So Pope and goal with the clean sheets. Cancelo and Walker, both City defenders, getting me points. Salah captain, getting 12 doubled to 24. Martinelli with 8 and Haaland with 13. I was quite fortunate. So I switched on Thursday evening, I think it was, from Kane to Haaland on the basis that I didn't want to book in the transfer for Game Week 2. I knew I'd want Haaland versus Bournemouth, but I didn't want to book in that transfer. So I thought, you know what? Kane's probably going to outperform Haaland Game Week 1, but I'm just going to suck it up and take it. Now, that was wrong, but luckily, because I didn't want to, luckily I'd gone for Haaland anyway. It was 50-50. It could have gone either way. It swung my way this time. It's going to swing back my way at some point later in the season. So I'm probably quite fortunate there. Overall, not bad at all. So in our Big at the Back podcast league, I'm currently 7th. How have you done?
I am just below you in 8th in our league, 3 points behind you on 70 points. I sort of spoke about a little bit about my team earlier. So Pope in goal with the clean sheet. Chilwell, Zinchenko and Walker all with clean sheets plus assists for Chilwell and Zinchenko picked up the 3 bonus points. Trent and Robertson letting me down at the back. Midfield 3 did fuck all. Luis Diaz, Grealish and Sancho with 2, 3 and 2. And then Jesus and Haaland up front with Haaland as captain. So he got me 26 points. Wilson on the bench with 6 was the slight frustration. So if I'd have put him in, I could have gone above you. As a team without Salah, I don't think that's too bad. We'll see, obviously, how that goes in Game Week 2. It's a little bit riskier, probably. So we'll see how that goes. We've got Jimmy Verrier at the top of the Big at the Back podcast league. A strong opening showing with him with 82 points. And I think in second place is my best man, Luke Brown. So a good start for them too. But yeah, Jimmy Verrier in there with 2 Chelsea defenders, Salah captain, Kulusevski, Martinelli, and Cancelo in there as well.
Luke also has 2 Chelsea defenders in. Salah captain and Cancelo and Haaland. So that's what's made it up for Luke to start the season. Seems to be a theme here. Big at the back from the beginning. In our draft league as well, I beat my head-to-head opponent, a friend of ours, Mark Shaler, by 1 point, and that 1 point was the Cancelo yellow card for making glasses at the referee, which I found to be very, very entertaining. But yeah, all to play for. It is only game week 1. Are you looking at any transfers for game week 2?
No, not at all. I'm not bothering. My team is fairly well set up for game week 2, so I think it would be a complete waste. What I will just say before I throw this back to you is our joint team had a pretty poor week with 52 points, but we did leave points on the bench. Martinelli on the bench with 8 and Mitrovic on the bench with 13. So that was a big disappointment. We will have to set our team for next weekend at some point, and we'll figure out how we're going to go with that. But yeah, I think we are of the same opinion that you're not making any transfers for this week.
No, I'm not. But I think in the joint team, we need to drop Mahrez. I think it's very clear that Foden is going to be starting on that right, Grealish on that left. So I think Mahrez needs to go for another 8 million. Be that Kulusevski, be that Mount. We just need to free up that money essentially, and we need Martinelli to be starting every game, especially over Luka Coutinho.
How dare you?
But that's the lot from us. Obviously, loads more to come next weekend. We're going to be back after the game, so probably on Tuesday, because I think the Liverpool game is Monday night. But correct. You can find us on Twitter at Big at the Back.
Yep, get involved with the conversation over there. You can also find me on Twitter at Higgins92, and Tom is at TomMadden92. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and hit that notification bell so you get a notification whenever a new video goes live. And you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So yeah, come and get involved with the conversation. Let us know how you got on this week, and if you're thinking of making any transfers for coming up for game week 2, let us know in the comments.
Until next time, we'll see you all next week, guys.